Urban. On the environmental permissiveness spectrum, the principal should only conduct urban meetings in the most permissive environments. Both the general populace and the host nation authorities should either be supportive of or indifferent to the principal's presence. This will allow the parties to move and meet freely without too much worry someone will notify the adversary or become hostile. Public venues are acceptable for assessing a potential resident, developing a relationship, or seasoning covers. It is acceptable to have other members of the public see the relationship and overhear some of the cover conversations. Although, the principal must ensure selected venues accept both him and the resident. Even in permissive environments, personal biases may exist, which the principal should guard against. The principal conducts counter-surveillance support for the resident in public venues. However, there are mechanics that mitigate the exposure of the contact in such a non-secure location. These contact locations offer some form of temporary concealment from passerby, usually just long enough to pass instructions for the next location. The principal designs the counter-surveillance route to elicit surveillance behaviors, which allow the principal to decide whether going ahead with the contact is safe. If the principal does not detect surveillance, he makes a brief contact with the principal to set up the primary contact at a semi-secure site. If surveillance is present, then the principal makes no contact and preserves the resident's natural patterns. The purpose of counter-surveillance is to mitigate the risk of the adversary knowing of the clandestine activities or relationships, which might result in the adversary forcing their way into the meetings. Often, the principal has some documents, notes, or equipment that will help the operation's progress, which may also compromise it. If the adversary suspects the meeting will have such evidence, then they may intrude, leaving the principal and resident vulnerable. When it comes to the semi-secure sites, there must be some form of access control from the public. Restaurants, cafes, bars, lounges, and so on offer no access control. Anyone can approach, and the principal has little control over those around him. Hotels, conference rooms, private or VIP sections, and so on are semi-secure, and that the patrons can accept that no person will stumble into the meeting. This privacy keeps the public from raising concerns about the activities or topics discussed, mitigating adversarial awareness. The reason these are semi-secure is because authorities may still enter. Authorities are not just official authorities, but anyone with the will and capability of forcing entry and negatively affecting the operation. The principal does not need a battle-hardened location for a meeting, and often the coordination thereof is not worth it. The public may see the principal and resident enter or leave the meeting site. The principal must have covers for any potential questions someone raises about the relationship, but no cover for what they discuss or pass in the meeting. In those areas the adversary is known to intrude, it is important that no compromising equipment, documents, or notes be present. Rather, only props that support the cover if the adversary intrudes. The principal avoids establishing safe houses for meetings in less permissive environments because it introduces many risks. It mixes the residents' awareness of each other, and the principal avoids using the same locations for multiple meetings, so recruiting a keeper would be quite expensive for a single meeting. The principal also avoids using abandoned buildings because there would be no alibi to justify such a meeting. Instead, vehicular or rural meetings would be more proper in more hostile regions. The principal avoids clandestine meetings at either his or the residents' frequented locations, such as home, business, or places of leisure. By meeting at these locations, the principal has little control over personal interruptions. The cover is there to answer questions, but the principal should avoid situations that need its deployment. Any interference will need another 2 weeks planning and preparation to finish what they started. Furthermore, if the adversary has suspicions, the first places they start surveillance are homes, businesses, and places of leisure. Being that this type of surveillance is likely to have fixed and continuous surveillance, the location may expose the other party to the adversary. When conducting an urban contact, the process is profile, case, validate, and execute. Urban contacts are the easiest to case and more common for a normal meeting than any other environment. They are also the most expensive, most vulnerable to casual observation, and the most susceptible to intrusion. The first step in figuring out suitable sites for contact is developing a site profile. This profile should take into consideration the demographics and characteristics of both parties, the relationship they have together, and what the principal must do at the location. The principal has more flexibility than the resident, but his cover life, demographics, and natural patterns are still limiting. The resident will have similar limits, but with more restriction. Often the resident does not have a malleable cover, and he must answer to family, friends, and employers more so than the principal. This may inherently limit contacts to lunch breaks, a few hours before or after work, and leisure days. The activity the principal expects to perform at the meeting location will have the most significant impact on the site choice. Types of activities include non-sensitive, brief contacts, and operational. Non-sensitive activities are those that will not lead to compromise if intruded or eavesdropped. If someone were to sit next to the meeting to listen and watch, then they should not glean anything except evidence that supports the cover. The principal should neither worry nor panic if someone pays more attention than he should. Rather, the principal keeps the eavesdropper in the back of his mind to assess later. In the paradigm of exposure and logic, these non-sensitive contacts rely significantly more on logic than minimizing exposure. This is not as risky because the principal sanitizes the contact and there is neither evidence nor discussion of clandestine activities. Despite not performing sensitive activities at non-sensitive meetings, the principal still incorporates counter-surveillance before the contact. Depending on the phase of the relationship, the principal may not teach the resident counter-surveillance. Doing so may worry the resident and result in lost rapport. However, when casing, the principal should seek those establishments where it offers some natural counter-surveillance elements to watch the resident upon arrival and spot any potential surveillance following him. Most of the non-sensitive activities will be some public venue. The principal sets up these meetings to build rapport, further assess the resident, and solidify the covers. Most relationships rarely start with private meetings. The beginning stages of a relationship are often at public, mutually enjoyed venues. Movies, restaurants, bars, parties, clubs, meetups, fairs, and markets are common venues attended as their relationship develops. The principal takes this into consideration and selects venues proper for that phase of the relationship. The site and its theme must fit within the covers the principal establishes with the resident. The principal selects neither a location where either party would feel uncomfortable, nor the other patrons would feel uncomfortable with either party's presence. There are many societies in the world that are sensitive to foreigners, or people of different races, classes, religions, and cultures meeting together. Some societies may even misconstrue two genders as inappropriate. A suitable location would not only allow either party's demographics, but their presence together does not attract attention. The principal should hold urban meetings in neutral or friendly regions whenever possible. Many intelligence agencies specifically look for residents who have natural, international business or personal travel patterns to such regions. If not, the principal seeks residents who have a natural pattern to a neighboring city, preferably one with an abundance of both demographics. This offers much more anonymity, and many popular hotels allow for both a foreign principal and local resident to enter and exit freely without drawing too much attention. When the principal cases a location, he visits it at the days and times he expects to use it. There's little reason for going to a restaurant to decide its suitability in the morning when the meeting will take place in the evening. The day of the week, the time of the day, and any societal celebrations play a significant role in assessing the cross-section of customers at any given location and time. A bar and grill will have quite the different feel and clientele at noon on a Tuesday than at 8 p.m. on a Friday. Also, the principal considers societal events, such as celebrations and sporting events. If there is a national holiday or game playing, people may go out to celebrate, which could alter the suitability of a location. Conversational topics can be spontaneous. In the clandestine world, spontaneity can be dangerous, especially considering what clandestine relationships are based on. The resident may bring up something urgent or interesting even though the principal did not plan for it. Therefore, every location should offer some seclusion where the meeting can broach such topics quickly. Otherwise, it would be wise for the principal to have a backup location to discuss such sensitivities. Furthermore, seclusion within a venue helps minimize the distraction of constantly assessing those next to the meeting. The principal should easily see and assess those entering the meeting location. He should be far enough away to react to any threats without appearing obvious. If the principal is too close to the entrance when the adversary arrives, then the principal's immediate departure may draw attention. Contrast this with being far enough away. The principal can assess the adversary's behaviors, leave enough money to satisfy any debts, and excuse himself well before the adversary can spot him. This leads into the escape route. The principal selects a pinpoint location closer to an exit than any entrances a potential threat may appear. The principal does not necessarily sit next to the exit, which may draw the adversary's attention at first when looking for a clandestine meeting. When deciding a suitable distance, the principal takes the following actions into consideration. When a potential threat interrupts a meeting, the principal expresses that either him or the resident must leave at once, and depending on the type of establishment, satisfies the check. When leaving, the principal avoids any threats, and at a pace that is casual yet purposeful. Site characteristics that warrant note include payment methods. Cash is king, as it is the quickest to satisfy debts, and once laid on the table, there is no need to wait for someone to run a card, sign, and most importantly, try to figure out what to do if the crediting system is down. It is also important to know how much money the principal needs in preparation to satisfy any debts. Hours of operation. The principal notes what days and times the establishment is open. He does not waste time trying to use an establishment that is not open during his planned meeting. It is also important to know peak hours to avoid customer rushes that may hinder seclusion or prevent use. Seclusion is how difficult it is to see or eavesdrop on other patrons at a venue. Many venues will have areas that differ in levels of seclusion. Sometimes seclusion is uniform. It is important to note these levels during the days and times when the principal expects to use the site. The principal quantifies how far others can see or hear, what visual obstructions there are, and how much ambient noise exists to mask a conversation. These metrics will lead to a definitive radius around the proposed meeting spot. If there are areas that are more secluded than others, he names those areas and describes how they are more secluded. Seat selection. Some establishments assign seating, and others allow patrons to choose their own. Regardless, the principal should know what is acceptable and normal. Even if the establishment allows for patrons to select their seats, but treats the request as odd, the principal should avoid asking. If the establishment considers requests for seclusion acceptable and accommodates, then it may be a suitable location. Demographics. The principal must note what the normal and occasional demographics of a venue are. When the majority of clientele are of one demographic that is different from the intended meeting participants, it does not mean it is unsuitable. Several casings should confidently show whether the location would be acceptable for the principal and resident. Characteristics the principal should take note while casing includes various ethnicities, attires, payment methods, menu, average and acceptable length of stays, diversity among and between parties, discussions, and attention paid to those outside a party. Layout. The principal notes the entrances, exits, restrooms, staff areas, windows, and their opacity, tables, and seating arrangements, visual obstacles between areas, and the density of persons in the various sections. Understanding these elements will help plan a proper exit and assess the seclusion from inside and outside the site. Service. The principal notes how helpful or inquisitive the staff are. Sometimes asking many or personal questions is based on the staff member, but other times this is establishment policy. The principal notes how quick servers return to the table to refill drinks or clear dishes, how often they ask questions,